listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans. This is your Overwatch League Daily episode from March 15th, 2018. Today I'm joined by San Francisco Shock analyst Harsha. We're going to discuss a wide range of topics around the Shock and the league, including Moth and Architect, as well as Super and Sinatraa. But first, here's your scoreboard brought to you by patreon.com/OWL Daily Show. The Dallas Fuel are looking to get their first win since the first week of Stage 2. They'll go up against the Boston Uprising, who has struggled so far in Stage 2. This match was pretty much all Boston, as they would sweep the Fuel 4-0. For the second match of the evening, we saw NYXL take on the Seoul Dynasty. These teams are both in the top 2 for the stage and the season so far, and this match did not disappoint. This one would go to all 5 games, but in the end, NYXL would come out on top and give the Dynasty their first loss of the stage. NYXL wins 3-2. For the final match of the evening, the Philadelphia Fusion would sweep the Shanghai Dragons 4-0. Here's a look at tonight's matches. The Shanghai Dragons will go up against NYXL. The Florida Mayhem will face the Valiant. And to round out the evening, the Gladiators will look to continue their Stage 2 momentum with Fissure, as the Outlaws will look to come out of their slump. The action starts at 4 p.m. Pacific time over at overwatchleague.com and twitch.tv/Overwatch League. Let's get to my interview with Harsha about the Shock. All right, Harsha, welcome back, man. It's been a couple months. Last time you were here, we chatted about the Shock a little bit, but obviously there's a lot more going on with you guys. But first, welcome back. It's good to see you again.
Thanks, man. Good to be here and excited to talk about surprise, the Shock again.
Yeah, right. Who would have thought? It's really exciting. You guys have been making a lot of moves since the end of Stage 1, and this past week, just even more, 2 big moves. And then obviously we're within a couple weeks of Sinatraa and Super being eligible. So pretty exciting there. I've got some questions just about all the different players and then some Shock questions for you. But let's start with Moth. Before Overwatch League, Dak was predominantly known for his Lucio play. And with the addition of Moth, how does Dak factor into the Shock once Moth arrives?
So Moth is actually here already. Basically, the two of them are probably going to be competing for, that starting main support role, the Lucio and the Mercy. I think that while Dak's obviously like a really, really great Lucio, he struggled a bit on Mercy during the Stage 1 meta. And bringing in Moth kind of aims to add some consistency to that role while Dak also gets to practice and earn his spot. Like, both of them will be competing for it, basically. Additionally, like, both of them are pretty vocal in comms, and I learned this actually recently because I'd never been in an environment with Moth before, but he's really vocal in terms of like tracking ultimates, setting up plans for the next fight and stuff like that. So he's going to be really big for our team, in my opinion.
Well, and just from an outsider's perspective, it kind of looked like Dak really kind of took on kind of a team mentor role in a lot of ways. You can correct me on this, but I do believe he's the oldest person on the Shock roster. And
yes.
He seems to carry a lot of weight from like a leadership morale perspective, from an outside perspective. And that doesn't go away. I'm guessing that you guys still want him to play that kind of role with the Shock.
Yeah, absolutely. He's like definitely an emotional leader. He's always going to be at the practice room, making sure that everybody's in the right mindset and they're taking everything seriously. And he's a really competitive person. So I think his personality will be like really important for the team going forward, regardless of whatever role he's in.
So you kind of mentioned that Moth is a vocal person, can be kind of an in-game comms leader. Is there anything else that in your mind Moth will really bring to the table to the Shock that maybe we haven't seen from the team so far?
Yeah, I think Well, I think obviously it's going to be hard to say because, flex support is such a, not flex support, main support is such a role where you're pretty much always going to be on either Lucio or Mercy, or in certain situations, maybe the Ana. So like those are kind of heroes where you're just going to kind of need them, and they have specific roles that have always existed. But the other thing to note is that I think that Moth has less aggressive tendencies than Dak, whereas Dak's somebody that really wants to be in the fight and always like fragging out. I think that Moth is more focused on like being on that supportive side of things, so it kind of adds a duality to our team.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be really interesting. I'm really excited to watch Moth and see what he brings to the Shock. The other big signing was Architect, and Monte Cristo has been the biggest Architect fanboy on Twitter, and I know that there's a lot of people out there.
I think I should correct you. I've been the biggest Architect.
Oh,
fanboy,
you are?
just
all
not
right.
Publicly.
Fair enough. My bad. But something interesting. So I went and tried to do some digging in some stats and noticed that the Shock have one of the lowest Genji pick rates in Overwatch League. How will Architect enable a different style of play for the Shock?
So I think one of the things to note here is that when Architect comes in, all of our players will be available to play. So that means Sinatraa and Dante and Baby Bay will already be available to play together. Something that we've been doing like for most of Overwatch League, we've been running like a Tracer Widow, a Genji Widow, Tracer Soldier, stuff like that, just because it fits our current strengths more. We don't have Sinatraa available, and Sinatraa and Dante, I would say, are the two best Tracers and Genjis on our team. So what that means is that we kind of are in a situation where we're playing a lot of like the hit scan, and when we have Sinatraa available to play, we can run more and more dive, right? So I think that percentage will change even before Architect joins the team. Now, when Architect joins the team, I think he's actually just one of the best, from like a mechanical standpoint, at least. He's one of the best Genji players I've ever seen. Like, and I'm not trying to overhype the guy. He's actually just that good. If you watched the Nexus Cup, I believe it was, where X6 Gaming actually won the finals. I think they beat the new Lunatic High, they beat the new Kongdu Panthera, and like it was really a lot of Architect doing that heavy lifting on Genji on Tracer. So, I mean, I'm really excited to have him on the team as well.
So this brought up a really interesting point from my last time. The last time we had someone from the Shock on the show was legit RC. He came on the show and mentioned that the Shock, the strategy at least was having a starting 6 for every situation, the same 6 players in and out, with 3 support players, a Genji specialist. You'll have Sinatraa and Super becoming eligible. Might we see some more substitutions from the Shock rather than the same 6?
Yeah, I think that pretty clearly the best formula so far in Overwatch League has been like a core lineup and then some people that you're rotating in and out of the game. And I think that's especially important on the DPS, where we have someone like Baby Bay who's incredibly talented on the hit scan. And then we can also have somebody like Dante, who's a really great Sombra and like a good flanker as well. We could have Architect, a really great Genji. We could have Sinatraa, who brings in his specific style of Tracer, or Dante, who brings in his own specific style of Tracer, right? So we'll have the ability to be flexible with that, depending on what the meta needs, depending on what the map needs. So I think that we'll certainly see a departure from the current style, but I think that you'll still see like a certain core that's always within the roster.
Are you kind of surprised that substitutions became such a kind of key part so quickly in Overwatch League? I think some people expected it to eventually, as teams got used to practicing all this time every week and living together and having, 12-man rosters so that you can do internal scrims. But are you personally surprised by the fact that we're seeing such success with a substitution strategy in Overwatch League?
Actually, no, not at all. Just because I'm just going to name one specific example, and that's because when you see a player who has one-trick Tracer for, let's say, the last 6 months, and you see a player who's played every DPS at a high level, but has also been like flexing on and off the Tracer, I think it's very clear to see the mechanical difference between that one-trick Tracer and then the player that that switches on and off the tracer. Like I think that's just it's a fundamental part of the game, like where you're specializing so much that you're surpassing people that don't choose to specialize as much, right? And so I think that with that example, you can also apply it to a lot of other heroes. And I think that's why we're seeing more and more substitutions. And I think it's especially important in that DPS role. We've also seen cases like Spree versus Coolmat with the Zarya and the D.Va. But I think that in general, DPS will also always just be a role where you're alternating people quite a lot. And maybe, I guess, I mean, to add to that, I think maybe you'll see it with Reinhardt and Winston, but probably to a lesser extent.
Do you think that the Overwatch League format of announcing your substitutions by the, what is it? I believe the end of the first round of the previous map, I think is what it, something.
It depends on it depends on the game that you're in. So on the first, third, and fourth games, yeah, it's after the end of the first round of that map. But during the second map, it's actually after the entire map itself,
because you have halftime essentially.
Right, yeah.
So do you think that that's a really good substitution format for Overwatch League? Are you a fan of that?
Personally, I mean, I think it's okay, but I think it would obviously be way better if you could just wait until after the map itself. You potentially haven't even played half the map yet when they ask you to substitute for certain maps. So would definitely prefer if they were able to do that, but I understand the concern. They need to get everything ready in time for production. They need to make sure there are no hiccups in the process when you're switching out players. So I can see why they don't do it, but I think just from a competitive standpoint, from an entertainment standpoint, because you want to see the best possible matches, right? Right. I think you should be able to wait until after the map itself is completed to do a substitution.
I'm glad you feel that way, because I kind of feel, I'm like, yeah, I like this and I understand why, but it'd be really nice. It feels right. Sometimes you don't know until the end of the map if somebody you're like, oh man, we should put this person in, and with the way that someone's playing. And there's certain circumstances where maybe a player wasn't doing well in the first half, and then suddenly he hits his stride, and then plays really well during the second half, and then all of a sudden he's being subbed out, even though he just maybe potentially carried a map, right? So right. I
think that's part of the reason I'd like to see that change.
I have one more question about Architect, and I don't know much about the languages that he speaks. I couldn't find any information online specifically about if he does speak English or some English. But A, do you know if he's relatively fluent in English? And B, how will the Shock incorporate Architect if there is that language barrier?
Personally, I've heard he's not that great at English, but I actually don't know. So I've only had written conversations with him. And in those written conversations, he's actually really, really good at English. Oh. But he might be using a translator. I personally don't know. Okay. But the thing is, we do have a Korean coach now. His name is Junkbuck. He's helping us out with a lot of the in-game strategy. And so he will also be able to help us out when it comes to translating Korean, teaching Architect Korean as well. So I think we're not too worried just because we have Junkbuck on hand.
That's good. I totally forgot about Junkbuck. So yeah. I remember that signing going right through. I want to talk to you a little bit about Super. We hear a lot about Sinatraa and how he can fit in and coexist with Dante going further. However, we haven't really heard much about the plan for Super and how he might fit into the current Shock tank line with Nomi and Nevix. Super's hero pool, at least historically, is kind of interesting. He's played a lot of main tank and flex tank roles in the past. We've seen him on the Reinhardt. We've seen him on the Winston. But we've also seen him on the Roadhog and the D.Va. How can the Shock utilize Super going forward with that kind of unique tank pool?
So I think that we're just probably going to be plugging him in where we think he would do the most for our team. And part of that is, so I guess right now I'll make it clear that he's been practicing his main tank, mostly his Winston. Part of that is just because he's such a vocal person, such a person that really commands action from his teammates. I think it's really good to have him on an engaging tank like a Winston, somebody that can coordinate dives, coordinate a target that he wants to, if he sees, he wants to kill. And I think that that's likely where he'll end up. Now, he does have the flexibility to play other heroes, and maybe certain compositions call for that. So I can't rule out the possibility right now that he plays flex tank as well.
Sure.
And he really does want to play Roadhog on stage. But right now it's looking like he's going to be playing the main tank when it comes to it.
So I do have a couple questions just about the shock in general. A little bit more broad questions. Broad question. We're coming up towards the end of stage 2. Do you think that the shock have kind of performed to their expectations so far, or do you think that they've kind of underperformed, maybe overperformed?
It's hard to say, but just because I have so many like bitter memories of matches that we just were in control of, but like threw away. So I certainly think we could do better. I think we could be at like a 500 record right now, but we just happen to be, I think 5-11. Is it something around that area?
Yeah. I think
so, you know, part of that is disappointing. Part of that's like, okay, well, I mean, it's not too bad. We can certainly work with it, and we're going to have a very like stacked roster coming up, right? So once stage 3 happens, that's, I think, when you'll see our real potential. And I think, you know, no surprise there. You know, we just have to work with what we have, you know? And I think that we're obviously going to be taking stage 2 very seriously, because playoff contention is just not out of our sights, basically.
Right. Well, and so I was going to ask you this, is with your recent additions, where do you realistically see Shock finishing at the end of stage 1? Is this a team that, even with such a young roster, can compete for, for a really strong playoff run?
I think there's no question, honestly, just from the raw talent standpoint of the people we have currently riding the bench. So we have Super Sinatraa, 2 of the best players from North America, in my opinion. We have Architect, one of the best players from Korea, coming in. We have Moth, somebody that's, you know, going to be very helpful in developing this team in terms of like a structural standpoint. I think that like playoffs is definitely the goal for everybody here. I think that we're, you know, given the record we have to work with, I think we'll probably be having to like sneak in towards the bottom of the playoff pack. But I think that certainly everybody's aiming for that at least, and they want to push further than that.
So I have one question then, and you might have just answered it, honestly. Besides obviously just winning games, what are your team's main goals for season 1? So it sounds like playoff contention being one
absolutely.
Of those.
So I don't think it's any secret that the team is like really young, and that this is a team that has like a lot of potential moving forward, and that the org has a really solid group of guys that they can develop and move into the future with. But I think that certainly everybody's still, you know, season 1 is the goal. Nobody's really thinking about the future right now. They're thinking about what they're looking at the end of the season, you know?
Right. Well, Harsha, I don't have anything else. Is there anything that you wanted to say out, and anything to Shock fans out there, anything like that?
I mean, I know it's been tough at times. I know I've seen matches myself that have really hurt, but I'm glad that everybody's stuck with us, and I hope they continue. And, you know, you guys are going to see what we're made of when everybody's here and unlocked.
I'm waiting for the website to update with those Architect jerseys, and then, then I'm on board. Harsha, always a pleasure, dude. I really appreciate you taking the time to stop by, especially with such a busy schedule. Can't wait to do it again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
My thanks to Harsha for stopping by on the show today. I always love getting his insights, and I really appreciate how he's just always really honest with his answers. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at @GGHarsha. And tomorrow I'm going to actually post the part 2 of our Pit Championship segment with Hurix. It was originally going to be Wednesday, and then the schedule got kind of crazy, but I'll be back tomorrow to discuss the Pit Championship EU side with Hurix. If you like the show, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or your podcast app of choice so you don't miss future episodes. You can also watch or listen to the show at winstonslab.com. You can also find links to everything at overwatchleaguedaily.com. Last but not least, if you have a question or comment for the show, email me at overwatchleaguedaily@gmail.com. My thanks again to Harsha for joining me. I'll be back tomorrow with Hurix for another episode of Overwatch League Daily.